Welcome to another episode of Joe and the Fat Man. Joe Smeltzer of Nittany Sports Now here with Kyle Fat Man Golick of Nittany Sports Now and Mike Farrell Sports, and Jay Hallahan of Mike Farrell Sports, who doubles as our producer. James Franklin talked with media this week, and for the summer, that's pretty big news because it doesn't happen often. Between the Blue White game, which was April 19th this year, and Penn State's Media Day, which is August 2nd. I guess you could consider Big Ten Media Day as part of that too, but I'm talking specifically Penn State Media Day. James Franklin only talks in June, and that date happened to fall on June 5th. And every Penn State assistant coach was available to Penn State's reporters after Franklin spoke for 26 minutes. That means Andy Kotelnicki, Jim Knowles, all of them were available to us. And one thing Franklin talked about, as he ends up talking about in a good bit of his pressers, was injuries. And there's some good news and bad news on that front for Penn State. The good news is that a trio of players who weren't active during spring ball will be good for fall camp and even before fall camp, Franklin says. Those are Andrew Rapplier, a talented tight end who missed basically his entire sophomore season due to injury. Anthony Donko, another second-year player last year, who started most of the year at right tackle before getting hurt against Minnesota in late November and then missing all of Penn State's playoff run. And then there's Tony Rojas, who actually played all of last season at linebacker, but as we now know, played hurt last year and was held out of spring ball as a result. Having all those three guys good to go will be big for Penn State, but the bad news is that Max Granville, a defensive end who would have gotten a lot of playing time, if not been a starter in his second season at defensive end, he is out with a long-term injury. And although Franklin didn't use the word season ending, there's yet to be a case of Franklin using the term long-term injury and that player in question returning. So, guys, let's start with Granville. Obviously, this is awful for the player, and not much explaining needs to be done as to why Granville hurt himself, Franklin said during an offseason workout. But for Penn State, fellas, what does this mean for the team? And are you comfortable with the depth at the position behind them, especially considering that Penn State lost three of its top four contributors at defensive end from last season, one of them being number 3 overall pick Abdul Carter? Fat Man, we'll start with you.
It's you know what, even with the tremendous depth Penn State has at defensive end, and they've really blossomed that position into an absolute strength with the team, Joe and Jay. Granville, I think, was a cut above the competition. He came and he reclassified. As many of you know, he was on the playoff run last year. He looked like he was positioning himself to play opposite of Denai Dennis Sutton. And this was with, Eni White coming in, who was a former 5-star athlete. This now opens up the door for the often injured White that I mentioned, who was a Texas A&M transfer and a 5-star guy. Zariah Fisher is also a 6-year senior who many people feel that he may see a late season, like, career surge in his final year of eligibility. But then, Joe, Jalen Harvey, a guy I pointed out in the blue-white game, who had a pretty impressive blue-white game, might thrust and take an opportunity. Malachi Williams is another good guy. Penn State has the depth. It's painful, Joe and Jay. It's just really painful.
Yeah, I think, to your point, Kyle, they have the depth. It's just unproven what they truly are able to do as a unit, especially together on this team. And it's a real bummer. I mean, for Max Granville too. I mean, reclassifying, coming in, spending all that time last year, learning the defense, building up his body to take on, 20-some-year-old offensive tackles, and then to be able to have a season-ending injury like this stinks. And it's losing
it's
Abdul.
Season-ending. I mean,
long-term injury.
All signs point that way, though.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but I think with Zariah Fisher, whom I remind myself every time he's still part of the program, because I just haven't. Let's face it, we haven't seen him. It's such a bummer to not have Granville, and hopefully we'll see what Fisher is finally able to do. And I mean, this would have been a perfect opportunity for Amin Vanover to stay, but obviously that doesn't happen.
Well, the key thing too is someone has to draw the attention for Nittany, like opposite Nittany, to get respect to allow Nittany to do what he does well. Again, as I mentioned in my news article about this, Nittany Dennis Sutton is second nationally in pressures of out of all defensive ends nationally since he's been on campus with, I believe it's 75 pressures. So, I mean, he's obviously going to be a focal point, and having that complement opposite you only makes you more dangerous. I mean, we saw it with Abdul and Nittany last year. I mean, Nittany really got into his own last year. And, Granville, everyone was talking about Joe late last year. Everyone was talking about the leaps and bounds Granville was making. And he was like the buzz name. If there was one guy that, you felt that was going to be an impact player that you didn't know, it would have been Max Granville. So I don't want to paint doom and gloom right now. That's not on my palette like Bob Ross is painting at home, but it's definitely not the news Penn State fans want to be hearing. And I mean, they got great depth. Don't get me wrong, but we're going to find out how good that depth is. I mean, when we start transitioning over to who's coming back, look at what happened with Donko last season. Donko was a semifinalist for the Sean Williams Freshman of the Year award, and Nolan Rucci stepped in, and it didn't miss a beat. And I think right now that's what Penn State's hoping is whoever steps up and secures, because really, Granville really, like, I know it's a huge injury, but Granville hasn't really officially won that other job. I mean, it was kind of assumed like he would be a prohibitive favorite, which is why it's such big news. But we're going to find out. We're hoping it's in this case for Penn State fans and for Franklin and everyone that with Granville's injury, they have somebody that can fill that gap, whether it's Eni White, Fisher, etc.
Yeah, and it seems like go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say, and you have to be glad too Zane Durant stayed, because that's also going to help him as well, being in the middle, and that'll take away attention from whoever that outside edge rusher is as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about the edge rushers, it feels like this happens every year with Penn State. Some defensive end goes down with a long-term injury during the offseason, even going back to before I got on the beat. Adisa Isaac in 2021, he was announced, I think it was during Penn State's local media day, that he'd be out for the year. The next season, Zariah Fisher has a serious injury in spring practice. He was actually able to come back in mid-November and play out the last few games. That's the best case scenario for Max Granville. We'll see what happens there. But then 2023, Smith Filbert misses the whole season. Last year, Zariah Fisher, bless his heart, gets hurt again, ends up missing the whole year this time. And this year, unfortunately, it's Max Granville. But talking about the guys that have pretty much a clean bill of health, right? Franklin's pretty confident that they'll be healthy for for fall ball and even before the start of fall camp. Donko, Rojas, and Rapouille. We'll talk about Rojas and Rapouille more extensively later. Obviously, Rojas has the potential to be the top linebacker on this team. I think all Penn State fans would agree with that. And then Rapouille is in a crowded room, right? You got Luke Reynolds is emerging as people are expecting him to be the guy. You have Khalil Diggins, who it feels like has been there forever. He's a guy that is going to be on the field a lot for his blocking ability and his ability to snag in the occasional touchdown in the red zone. And then Rapouille missed a year of progress, and we'll see how it makes it up. But the guy I really want to focus on is Anthony Donko. And how interesting this makes not the right tackle position, but the right guard position for Penn State. Because this really shows how much depth Penn State has accumulated over at offensive line over the past few years. We went from in 2022 not knowing if Penn State would be able to play a spring game because they just didn't have any offensive linemen to suit up, to now it's in the conversation for the best and the deepest offensive line in college football. And a big example of this is replacing Sal Wormley at right guard, right? I think a lot of people are thinking it's going to be Cooper Cousins. He's a guy that everybody's rooting for. He's a guy that has right attitude. He's a local guy from McDowell High School, committed to Penn State while he was still a freshman. And Penn State fans really, since he was committed, they had their eye on him, and they got to follow him into him becoming a 5-star by the time he was done. And he got some time last year, and now a lot of people are wanting / expecting him to jump into that starting role. And since everybody else is coming back besides Sal Wormley, people are thinking the best course of action would be for him to play right guard. Well, both Nolan Rucci and Anthony Donko are really good at tackle, and Drew Shelton is pretty good at the other tackle position. So is there a way to get Donko and Rucci both on the field? And if there is, what would happen with Cooper Cousins? So, fellas, who is the favorite to start at right tackle, do you think? And whoever isn't starting at right tackle, would they just be moved over to right guard? And could Cooper Cousins be the odd man out?
And Joe, we had a big transfer addition in TJ Shanahan,
Him
also
too.
on the right side. So you got you're too deep, literally on the right side of the offensive line. You know, one of the things with offensive linemen is you've got to build chemistry and rapport with who's to your side, because as offenses happen and all that, you're trusting that someone who's on your left, in this case, when you're at the right tackle position, or if you're at the guard, you know which direction it is. But you're anticipating, oh, I see the interior lineman making a rip move, and in our scheme, that should be picked up by the tackle or guard, or vice versa. So there's a lot of chemistry that needs to happen. If this isn't like defensive tackle, where you can have just a heavy rotation in at that position and just allow guys to do it, it's very chemistry driven position. So in my mind, if you can keep everyone happy and avoid the injury bug, you're deep at that position and you're not losing anything with that. So there's no rotation thing that I'm going to approve of, but it's a great problem to have. And here's another thing to keep in mind. Even if you start Rucci and you start Cousins this year, understand Rucci's gone, I believe, after this year. I believe he's a senior. That means you can have Donko step in. I mean, Jevin Williams is stuck behind Vega Ione on the left side. So you could have really experienced replacements as guys graduate. So it's a win-win situation. It's just, you got to keep everyone happy.
It's a testament to how Penn State has, for a while there, as Joe alluded to, in 2022, almost not being able to play a spring game. Penn State's depth at the offensive and defensive line under James Franklin, and really throughout the majority of his tenure, and even a little bit before that, it was poor. It really was. And fortunately now we have a great depth, and fortunately we have a team that is built the proper way to hopefully be contenders for a national championship. The thing, though, that when you think about those two players, it all obviously depends upon if Donko's ready, which if he is, I would probably like to think they're going to give it back to Donko. They may have a little bit of a battle there. You don't think so? You think they give it to Rucci?
He might have got Wally pipped. I think the way Rucci played in the playoff.
Well, I'm also thinking that too. Like, could you imagine there being a camp battle for that position?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, it's going to be interesting to say the least. But yeah, in terms of him flipping to right guard, I don't know. I really want to see. Part of me wants to really see what Cooper Cousins can do. Another part of me thinks that's a really tough switch to be able to make, to go from tackle to guard. It's not easy, as they say.
Yeah. But so, Kyle, I want to ask you this. Yeah. Sorry,
I was going to say, given the right O-line coach, you can make it happen. But go ahead.
So I was thinking about this, Kyle, when you played offensive line in high school, so you're kind of an authority on this. I think the expectation is that whenever 2025 holds for Cooper Cousins, Nick Dawkins is going to be gone after this year, and the expectation is that Cooper Cousins is going to be Penn State's starting center in 2026 come hell or high water. Does that mean that there should be more time spent with him at the center position specifically over the season, or would it be better for him to, just practice anywhere on the line?
So you obviously having the like him being at guard will help with him transitioning to center because you're in there. But the thing with centers are you are essentially the quarterback of the offensive line, where you're making sure your guys line up, they understand the snap count, you set the tone for the chemistry on the pocket, on run blocking, a lot of misdirection, a lot of that stuff. In Pittsburgh we've been blessed, from a Steelers fan perspective, Marquise Pouncey, Dermontti Dawson, Mike Webster, Jeff Hardy, Penn State.
They have a pretty good one now too.
Yeah,
yeah.
So when you see the athleticism and what you need to be able to do at that position, it's not one of those things that you can just dabble at. In a traditional sense. I mean, if like I don't know Cooper, like the coaches know Cooper and Troutline knows Cooper and maybe Nick knows Cooper, but from my experience, that center position is so pivotal because of how it sets up everything for the offensive line. So it's one of those things that I think he needs, kind of like how Abdul needed essentially that whole preseason last year to more from being a linebacker to an edge rusher. It's the same concept. It's just you're now quarterbacking that line. You're essentially setting the tone for everyone. So, it would be nice if they could find a way to get them some live reps. That always helps. But in the same vein, if you're at that point in the game where you're looking to get other people meaningful reps, you don't want to lose a Cooper Cousins because, again, a luxury can soon become a liability because of health issues. We saw it in the middle of last year with the running back group. So I'm thinking it's an off-season thing that they'll transition him into, if that's indeed they want to move him to center.
Yep, and I think that is the expectation. We are now wrapped up with segment 1 of Joe and the Fat Man. In segment 2, we'll talk about recruiting because it is June and college football fans know that is arguably the mecca of recruiting months. Stay tuned for Joe and the Fat Man.